Hello and welcome to Dynamics Update. This time it's a regular episode, and me and my colleague Gustav will talk about 10.0.26. Hello, Gustav. How are you today?
Hello, Johan. I'm doing great as always.
Nice. All right. So, how have you been since the last time?
I've been great, thanks. I'm waiting for summer to come, hopefully soon, but can't really complain now about the weather either. So I'm doing great. And you?
I'm suffering from allergies, so it's almost as good.
Yeah, I feel sorry for
But that's spring for you. So why shouldn't we get started? I'll let you start this time.
Thank you. It's an honor. As always, I go to my comfort zone and start with Commerce for Commerce platform. We're working on version 26 now, might be worth mention. So a lot of stuff coming after the initial first wave, the spring wave. Speaking about spring, spring wave release. There are a number of features coming in for Commerce, but the main one I wanted to mention is the support for catalogs in the e-commerce channel, specifically the B2B, where I see a lot of potential in this and the B2B platform, specifically the site builder and all of that, where you now, in a very common setup or a common scenario, is that you have different pricing or different. You provide different goods to different partners. So now you can simply define the catalogs and use those like partner specific product catalogs. And you might also have special pricing per partner, so it really allows for flexibility there. And I think that's worth look if you have a B2B sales channel, not really like tens of millions of transactions per second, perhaps, but you have a B2B channel. It's worth looking into the setting, I think, for instead of doing integrations towards separate third-party e-commerce solution. It's very good to investigate.
Yep, that's good. Okay, so my next one is a small one. I've been looking in a bit to the cleanup jobs last weeks, and one of the new things that arrived in 10.0.26 is the ability to set up cleanup jobs for product attribute values. As usually in Dynamics, we have a lot of normalized fields, which means that we don't have the values directly on the product, but we connect value lines to product lines. And in that case, when we remove the connection, we don't remove the actual product attribute value, but we just disconnect them. And that means that we will have a lot of things laying around, because the whole point is that we should be able to reuse for instance, product attribute values and connect them to another product and have them the same. But if we don't have any products that use a product attribute value, and we don't foresee actually having any products that will use it, then we can actually clean it out, and that will mean a smaller, leaner database.
Yeah, that's very nice.
Especially if we had, I mean, we could be in a situation where we have actually gone through our products and replaced a lot of attribute values. I know that you and I have discussed like the color palette and such before. That colors doesn't really have a specific name. I mean, they could be blue, but they could also be sky or water or ocean or anything like that. So
beach. So why is it blue? It should be sand. No, it's beach blue. That's a number of things, right?
Yeah, and in that case, if the old value is not modern anymore, then you might as well clean it out, because you will probably never use it again, because all of the products that had that value are already sold out. So in that case,
it's a technical maintenance, and it's a very good thing to mention. I think I would guess it's similar to the inventory dimension cleanup, kind of the same setup where you try to make use of reusing attributes. I mean, inventory dimensions cleanup process is just cleaning up anything that is no longer used. Of course, you fear a minimal performance hit because you have to recreate it, but it's a good housekeeping thing to set up. And I think in specifically, it might be that you change categories. You change the structure, or you move around, or you use categories or remove attributes completely, that you no longer want to use this attribute for this category or this node, etc. And that's where it comes into play, because then you have a number of redundant records that you're never going to use anyway. So it's a good housekeeping measure to bear in place. Absolutely.
Yes, and I would like to just mention cleanup jobs in general. That I think that it's if you come from an AX 2012 situation, that you normally historically haven't used that many cleanup jobs. But I think that since you're paying an huge amount of money for storage in FNO compared to your internal disks or SANs or whatever, I think it's a good idea. And I think especially that you should probably try to figure out if there is another place where you can store the information that you are no longer using in finance and operations, because it should probably not be in finance and operations.
No, exactly. I mean, Data Lake is a good first bet to start there, and then plan out your data retention strategy, what you want to do with historical data. But I know previously, a lot of these discussions before, we had the IDMF. Do you remember that one? The Intelligent Data Management Framework.
Yep.
I don't know if any of those solutions exist for 4365 now. There was a lot of these tools available to minimize DB storage, and they should be viable today as well. I'm not sure. That's maybe a different topic. We can have a special podcast on that one later on.
Yeah, and I also think that one thing that comes up when you talk about cleaning out data, except for regulatory approval and such, is auditors.
Yeah.
And historically, when we didn't use computer-based systems, we basically took the books and we moved them out to the basement whenever the year was closed. And I think we should probably have sort of the same routine. And even though the auditors need to get to the information, they don't actually need to have it in the system. They need to be able to see it. And I think that maybe there should be a good case made for creating some way of making it available to auditors, but without keeping it in the original system.
Yeah, I think it becomes a cost balance thing as well. In a cloud solution, if you have to pay for the storage of data, and that becomes an issue, then it's really up to the supplier, in this case Microsoft. There needs to be solutions to handle that kind of archiving, for like legal reasons as well. So I think it's a topic we should dive into really, and do some more homework first, because I think a lot of it is guesswork. But the topic always comes up: how much data should we save, etc. Specifically in like migration projects. But then you come like a clean slate. But then in a couple of years' time, you come to the same question: how much data should we save? What can we delete? Anything that's not really posted, you could theoretically delete. So it's a lot of discussions and topics to cover there. And
I think historically we've been using the process of better safe than sorry.
Exactly.
Let's keep it just to be safe.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the problem is that the cost now is a bit higher. So now you need to actually think about it, I guess. So
yeah, I know a lot of horror stories from experience. People printing a physical copy of all of their email and putting it in folders because it might be good to have. It's like, okay. And I know I had one, not an auditor, but a finance person who printed out everything and recalculated it on their own calculator just to make sure the system counted correctly. So I think that those days are gone, I hope, and that level of trust is still there. But it is a viable topic to discuss. It is not only from a cost saving perspective if you are paying for data storage, but also from a performance and just good housekeeping, specifically making sure that we don't store terabytes of redundant data if we can get rid of it.
At least not in a place where it's the most expensive.
No, cold storage, exactly, yes. Yeah, cold storage is perfectly fine. And with cold storage, I don't mean basement, I mean low cost. I mean a low cost data lake, similar solution, exactly. Yeah.
All right, so what's next on your list?
Let me check. I have a financial part. This is actually part of 25, but I just noticed it, so I thought I'd bring it up anyway. And it's budgeting related, and it's also a little experience of mine that in a lot of discussions with finance in new implementations, as well as activating new features, the budget is always like a discussion. Do we use budget? Many people or many organizations use external tools for calculating budget, but then you want to kind of import budget because you want to track it in Dynamics and or the ERP solutions where you kind of you can keep a real time or near real time tracking of the budget, or how well you keep against the budget. But there is now a little tool for mass update of budget lines. It's a very simple, it's DMF, and you could do it before as well, but this just simplifies it. There's a parameter for each budget plan that you can, like a button, you can use Excel add in, or you can just it's a pre-created template to be used for mass uploading budget lines, so you can still calculate the budget in whatever tool you deem fit or that you use today, or Excel, as a majority of companies use still, and then you can upload it into the system more easily. So it's a nice little add-in, and then you can safely say that we can do budget any way you like, but you can upload it then into ERP.
Yes. All right. So my next one is actually a bit sad, sort of, because if you're a bit nostalgic and have been working with IT for a while, then one of the nostalgic parts in finance and operation is that things tend to look a bit like Windows 8 with the live tiles, and you scroll sideways as you did on the first Surface tablets and so on. Unfortunately, a bit sad that Microsoft is now removing the horizontal scrolling and replacing it with vertical scrolling. So the workspaces that are released from 10.0 to 26 will be oriented in a vertical scroll instead of a horizontal scroll. So I guess you need to think about it when you build your workspaces, because they won't look exactly the same, but otherwise it's basically no difference.
All right. And I think the use of workspaces was really like forward looking when it was part. I don't remember, was it part of the original release of the old AX7 Rainier, or did that come later? Workspaces. I think
it was part of the original one, because I think that's actually the idea is quite old, and you can see the same thing a bit if you look in sales, CRM, and so on.
Yeah, of course, you're right. Yeah.
But as I said, I think I mentioned this. I think last time we talked that I don't think that they are custom workspaces are not that well used actually. I think.
Exactly. It didn't at least again from experience, and it's strange really, because I from a like whenever I talk about Dynamics at clients and other places, it's kind of. It's a very nice little sales pitch, really, because it's really understandable. You can go here, and here you can see how many orders do I have to work with, and you can really, like, if you design it properly or use a process that kind of matches how it's built properly. There's a lot of thought went into it. Like, you can go here, and this is where you can do your daily work, but a lot is kind of oriented around a specific role performed by a specific user, and the reality is that a lot of these roles in reality do a lot of stuff. So you need to have a lot of workspaces, but the point, and it usually ends up just running through the modules using favorites, turning off. And now with the views specifically, you can like build your own little personalization, and people learn. It doesn't really matter if you have 20 buttons. If you only use 2 of them, you kind of learn to just use those 2. You don't, in the end, you don't see the other ones. You just do that. So I think that's one of the drivers for it.
Yeah, but I think one of the a bit sad parts is that if you look at the AX2012, customers tended to do a lot of customizations and adding fields and buttons and specialized functionality to the workspaces in 2012, which had really a huge impact on the system.
Yeah,
and which was something that we needed to maintain forever and ever and ever. Yeah. And now that we move to Dynamics 365, you still have this option to do changes to the standard workspaces, but and with almost the same impact.
Yeah.
But the problem is that if you do custom workspaces, you basically have no impact at all. You just rearrange things and put them in a different canvas, which means that it's fairly easy as long as I mean, it's not that often that fields get renamed and moved to different entities and so on. So they are fairly low maintenance, the custom workspaces, and still they're not being used, because I think that, I mean, one of the things that I've said about 2012 and FNO is that they are fairly overwhelming. If you get into the UI for the first time, it's almost overwhelming to see how many things there are. So being able to making it a lot easier would be a good thing, I guess. But
absolutely, I think it's worth investing some time into that, because I mean, if you really only do a number of, like, let's say 10 things in the system each day, that's what you use. You normally you stick to favorites, right? But I think it would be interesting to kind of elaborate on that and see what can be done more with the use of works, or maybe some statistics. I mean, Microsoft should easily be able to pull out how many organizations actually use workspaces more than they use their regular approach of working in the modules. Would be fun. We'll have to kind of snag someone from Microsoft and hope that these figures aren't sensitive, so they can be broadcast.
All right. So what's your next one?
Is it my turn? Yeah, I have a number of ones, but I'll just take a brief. I'll take two, because one of them is just another recommendation to remember to look into docs, because I think it's a lot. Previous versions of Dynamics had okay documentation as long as you knew where to look for it on these different platforms, but docs really becomes better and better. It's a lot of good knowledge over there, and I just when browsing through the releases here, I found a very good, read it before, but it's been updated. That's why I bring it up now. It's an explanation of each of the inventory value models used in Dynamics. It's really nerdy stuff, but it's something I think is quite fun. I always have some, now that I actually understand some of these models, at least on a level that I can explain it. But I used to struggle a lot with FIFO models and moving average. So we like in how to explain it, how does it work, without a whiteboard to kind of do a lot of examples. But now if you go to docs, you have a number of well, they were there before, but they've been updated. Explanations and graphs and charts on, and really makes it easier for you to understand, because that's a very critical thing for any organization to do. If you come from an ERP that maybe doesn't use that, or you don't have the same options in your current system, the decision of which inventory value model to use is very, very critical, because that's something you don't easily change. It's connected to a lot of constraints and has a lot of impact. So not a decision you should take lightly. And if you're not sure of what it means, then go to docs and read up on it. That's something that was lacking before, and I think it's really it's good to see that it's there now. So read docs and check the FIFO specifically, and the weighted average and moving average documentations. The other one, just quickly to mention, this is an old favorite, of course, as well, the Inventory Visibility app. It's clear, again, that they're investing a lot of time and coming new features into those. One of them being the ATP, the Available to Promise functionality, where you are able to kind of tie in. It's simplified. If you don't have stock on hand, you're able to see when is it coming into stock. You could simply describe it as. So it's makes it easier specifically for e-commerce options, and also for physical stores, retail, where you can, well, we don't have it now, but it promises to be delivered next week, etc. So it allows the ATP functionality to be involved in the visibility app. And another third, when on the topic of inventory visibility, is also that WHS enabled items are now also properly handled. It says that it now supports it. I think it was a bug before, where if you have open work on an item which is warehouse controlled, WHS controlled or enabled, it calculated the quantities wrong because it summarized the inventory transactions and not taking into account the work types. But now it's supposed to handle both regular warehouse enabled items and WHS enabled items, which is a good thing.
Yes, that's good. So I would like to actually recommend something that is not in finance and operations. And I got wind of this this week, and it's actually called Dynamics 365 and Microsoft Power Platform Release Planner. It's actually a new platform for release notes in finance and operations, sales, and in Power Platform. And this means that you can actually create your own release plans so that you have a good overview on what's coming next in the next release, which features are available, which features, when the feature will be set to on by default, when the feature will be set to mandatory, and so on. So it's a really good way to be able to plan for the features. And with that, I would like to add a recommendation again that you actually try to plan this in your release cycles as soon as possible, even though they don't need to be enabled day one of the release, but you should plan for them. And you should definitely make a list of all of the new features and see if there are any that you can actually make available from day one in the sprint, so that you can start testing them right away. And those are generally the ones that either don't apply to you, those should be enabled, and the ones that doesn't require any major configuration or user training. Because the ones that require user training or maybe a lot of setup, those can wait until the next sprint. That's not a problem. But all of the other ones, move those out of the way so that you don't keep a technical debt in your release. I think that's important.
It's really good advice, and any solution that simplifies, because that's also another. Not so much. Everyone has their own way of handling releases and sprints, etc. And maybe many use the same tools, but release notes and kind of, I'm not saying you should stop listening to this podcast. You should not, but anything you can do to kind of simplify your own way of keeping up to date and knowing what's coming, but also like making sure that you don't miss features. I think any tool and aid that you can get to help you do this is very good.
Yeah, and I absolutely think that if you're doing like application lifecycle management with some kind of an agile approach, you should definitely move the features into like user stories at the sprint, so that you can actually make sure that they are configured, they are set up, they are enabled, and that you have the entire lifecycle over all of the environments and all the way up to the production release. That's important, I think.
Agreed.
Yes, next one is yours.
It's mine again. I don't think I have any more. I could bring one up just by looking at the release notes. There are a lot of stuff. One mention here is that it's fun to see that they're investing into fixed assets. Again, I think I mentioned this before. It's a module that I haven't really seen any much changes in, because it's not that changing. It's fixed assets. I mean, it's something you do. It doesn't change that much, but it's fun to see that in this release there are some new changes coming in. You're able to change the status of a fixed assets by using entity DMF. So I believe it's kind of built around the easier migration and easier handling, like Power Apps for handling fixed assets. So that's the only thing I have left on my list of nice features for this release that I thought worth mentioning. Do you have anything else?
Yes, I actually have one thing, and I really need your help interpreting something here, because I got a link from one of my application consultants the other day regarding Microsoft Dynamics 365 for finance and operations on premises, the local business data version, the one that you run in your own data center. There are a couple of things here that is quite noticeable. And one of them is that it says the following: the product lifetime of finance and operation on-premise software ends December 2027. and it also continues to say, licensed customers who are in compliance with this policy are entitled to product support. Product support is available at the minimum through December 31st, 2027. So that means that if Microsoft doesn't change anything, I mean, January 1st, 2028, as I am interpreting this, we will no longer be able to run the on-premise version.
You'll be able to run it, but it won't be supported, right? Isn't it the same story as with the X2012? It's also end of life, so it makes sense. I mean, we've had this discussion before. It makes sense from a like life cycle perspective, or what was. I haven't been involved in any on-prem installations for Dynamics, so I don't have a lot of input. I know it's tedious to set up, and I know it's there for a reason, and a lot of people are invested in data centers and want to kind of capitalize on that before moving to cloud. And it was always in all the discussions about on-prem in the whole life cycle from AX7, etc. My understanding has always been that it's there to support you until you're ready to go full cloud. It's always been how I understood that Microsoft kind of gave us this option to run on-prem, because it comes with a lot of requirements to set up and manage of your own. You have to maintain all of the certificates of your own, etc. But it does give you an option to run on-prem and run it in your own data center, basically running Azure in your own little data center. But it was always like, do this, of course, you can run it for a couple of years, but it's always going to be cloud first, like in a while. And now, if I understand what you say correctly, it's that in a while is coming closer.
Yes, and one thing that's also worth mentioning here is that, as you said, if you run on premises, you know this already, and that is that you need to run it in something called Azure Stack HCI, which is basically a packaged version of Azure.
Yeah.
But with that being said, it's not actually supported to run it in your own Azure subscription. So you are not allowed to run it in the actual Azure. You are allowed to run it on-prem in your Azure instance, but not in Microsoft Cloud.
No.
Because if you're running it in Microsoft Cloud, the only supported version is to run it as Microsoft is intending it to run.
Yeah. I think it's a lot of cool technology here. That Azure Stack is really cool. I've seen a lot of cool like the edge scenarios where you have some of offline functionality and offline capabilities, and the replication of on-prem data centers towards cloud is really cool. It's like something that and I understand the need for it in a lot of production scenarios as well. So I'm not saying, but I looking at the whole Dynamics ERP solution for Microsoft to support two versions becomes. I think it's a lot of issues for them, right? You need to always be able to think about these two scenarios. Will it support offline? Will it support on-prem? So it makes sense, of course, for them to do it. And I just hope, and it's a long time away still, but therefore it's good to kind of outline it right now. But again, if it's the same as the X2012, what does it actually mean if you're in that? If you haven't migrated fully in 2027, it's not that it's not Y2K bug all over. It's gonna shut down and planes will stop working.
No, absolutely. But it would be really. I'm really curious to see how, because there are customers who have chosen this version for compliance reasons.
Yeah, of course.
Meaning that they can't really choose another option because that's not available to them.
No.
And in that case, I'm wondering how they are going to solve this. I mean, one option here is actually that, I mean, one of the reasons for the compliance issue is that you are required to run in a data center in your own country.
Yeah.
And Microsoft right now is building data centers. They have opened their data center in Sweden. I read today that they're building a new region in Finland. So that means that maybe they are plugging these gaps, meaning that even the ones that are doing it for compliance reasons are actually able to run it in Microsoft's data center.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, placing a bet on that compliance is. It's sometimes I've been in discussions where it's kind of interpreted. How do you interpret that? Do you have to have the actual ERP production business data inside these the country, or is it a copy? It's always open for discussion. So it's 2027. I'm guessing it's a way away. So this is a way to also put a little pressure on that discussion and making sure that I don't think Microsoft can change the legal regulations, but if enough customers within a country object about something, it might make it easier for them to kind of change those regulations. I'm not sure, but again, at 2027, it's a very interesting thing to bring up because it kind of puts a deadline on when something needs to happen. Either you still run on an unsupported system, or Microsoft will extend that support for a while. Also a perfectly viable or reasonable option to go with. But in the end, it's in the long term, it makes total sense to kind of go full Azure cloud and not having two separate little versions where you have to always think about the fringe case that it might not work on-prem. You have to update those little lists of whatever is not supported in the on-prem versions, etc. So I understand long-term to go with just one solution. Me not being bound by such regulatory demands, so it's easy for me to say.
Absolutely, but there is also another aspect of this, which I know that we've been talking a lot about in other podcasts that I'm doing, and that is the data protection issue of this. The problem is that if you for instance take public sector in Sweden, it's highly doubtful if you're allowed to use a US data center supplier anyway. You probably need to use. You can't run your IT at a company that is under US law, because that means that they have complete jurisdiction in all of their data centers, meaning that there is no guarantee for data not to leave the data center in Sweden, for instance.
No, exactly.
Which is a problem.
Exactly, and that's a discussion that's really super important to be clear about, because I've been in dialogues like a couple of years ago with Swedish governmental, kommuner. Not sure what the English word here is for that one, but a smaller subset of governmental that kind of they were hesitant to discuss ERP in the cloud because there's like it's out of data perspective, storing data. We want to make sure that we keep the data within Sweden, and we were like, but you guys use Office 365, you use SharePoint Online, and this was back when they everything was run in Ireland basically. It's like, yes, we do. Oh, so they didn't really see the difference there, but about okay, it's not okay to store documents outside Sweden, but it's okay to store ERP data. It's super important to be clear about this, I think, for all parties.
Yeah, but as a tangential note, I know that, for instance, the municipality of Stockholm has actually stopped their Office 365 rollout, because of these legal issues. So they are probably, as it looks right now, they are probably backing out of running Office 365 altogether just because of this issue.
Yeah, exactly. And it's because this other municipality, thank you for the word, that was what I was looking for, that this other one then that they didn't realize this. So it depends on, that's why you have to be super clear. What are the actual rules of the game here? And I think Microsoft is trying to adhere to those by data centers in Sweden. I don't know if Dynamics is planned to be, or is in the near future at least, able to be deployed within the Swedish data centers, but before 2027 maybe that might be the case. So I think the only solution to that question, if the rules stay the same, that it needs to be within, specifically for municipalities, of course, that makes total sense. You don't want that to be on a foreign soil. Then you need to have a local data center without replication.
Absolutely. So with that, I think we are absolutely done for today. We've actually been a bit longer than usual, but we have a couple of interviews lined up. So I think that there will be coming a couple of extra episodes going forward. But until then, see you later and have a nice day.
Thank you. Have a nice day. Take care.
Bye.